Hi, I'm Debbie Howard, Chairman of the Carter Group and co-founder of the Living Best Professional Community. Today, we'll be hearing from Andy Miller. Andy is Senior Vice President for Innovation and Product Development for AARP, the American Association of Retired People, which represents some 53 million aging adults in the United States. AARP has taken a leadership role on the global stage in longevity and aging, and its AgeTech Collaborative smooths the pathway from product development through to market entry, to funding and beyond for AgeTech startups. Our thanks to Andy Miller for being with us today.
At AARP, we've created something called the AgeTech Collaborative, and it was born out of our work with startups. So we've worked with over 100 startups in the last 5 or 6 years, and we needed a mechanism to engage those startups with the broader ecosystem, with investors, with test beds, with enterprises, and even what we call business services. And so the idea was AARP can leverage its superpower. I talk about AARP's superpower being its ability to convene. So the AgeTech Collaborative has brought together all of these organizations in one location, one destination, to help convene and spark innovation in industry and make the connections that are needed so that we can deliver really powerful solutions that help us all age better. Yeah, so when we think about the trends that are happening in age tech today, there's really categories that we think about. Obviously, healthcare is probably the biggest, most top of mind. Inside of healthcare, it's really around the data and what's going to happen with AI. You know, and you're hearing this already. You're hearing how AI is being used in clinical settings to help diagnose faster, to help create solutions or therapeutics faster. That's going to continue, and it's going to just get more and more powerful. So that's sort of the big one we see inside of healthcare. Caregiving is another one. And we're seeing, I think AI will play a role here, but what we're seeing in caregiving is also this idea of matchmaking, right? We talk about the shortage of caregivers, and yes, that's true. But part of the reason there's a shortage, or maybe even feels like there's a bigger shortage than there is often people here in the United States anyways, we'll look at something like care.com or other organizations to try and find caregivers to help. And if it's not a cultural fit, a cultural match, you often get this churn, which then makes it feel like more of a burden than it needs to be. So we're seeing more and more emphasis put on matchmaking and really making sure you have the right fit for the caregivers that are coming in to help your loved ones. We talk about mobility. This is probably my favorite category because it spans a lot. So when you think about things like self-driving cars, right, or autonomous fleet vehicles that can be outfitted with really intelligent technology that maybe can tie to a wearable. So if I enter that vehicle, maybe it knows who I am, maybe it knows any illness or chronic conditions I'm living with, and it can adjust accordingly. So that's kind of one end, more futuristic, but on the sort of here and now, there's organizations that are reimagining things like the walker. Right, which is amazing to me because if you think about a walker, it has gone largely untouched for years. And we have multiple companies that we work with that are working on this. Things like gait freeze. So folks living with Parkinson's, that they start walking and they all of a sudden are stuck. We've got companies solving for that. So when we think about mobility, we literally think about the spectrum of walking around your home all the way to getting from point A to point B in a vehicle. A lot of interesting things happening there for sure. Social engagement or social isolation, another category, tremendous amount of, we see advancements. So we see things like digital games. So how can you play a game in 2 different locations? You're playing the same game together. I call it family game night. That's just awesome to me, right? VR, AR continue to progress. I think VR is still early days, but we're starting to see a lot of uptick with multiplayer, right? Multi-avatars in the session, so you can be with your friends, you can be doing interesting things. So that's another trend we're seeing. Smart home, obviously, is probably the biggest trend. And smart home's interesting because to me, smart home encompasses a lot of this technology that I just spoke about. If you can't walk around your house, how is it a smart home, right? I think we tend to go to technology that's actually stitched into the fabric of the home. And yes, that's absolutely part of it. But there's a lot of what I'll call bolt-on technology, things you can bring into the home. And so all of these things are interesting, right? The biggest problem with all of them is they tend to be point solutions that solve a great problem, but in and of themselves only are a fraction of what's needed. So we've been working with a large company right now to look at we're calling a living lab concept. And the living lab concept is really about bringing all these different solutions together, doesn't matter which ones, but to create a ubiquitous data layer. And if you can get a ubiquitous data layer, you can then extrapolate contextual insight. So I can know exactly what's happening throughout the entire day. And I often talk about this. If my mom's living in the backyard in an ADU, maybe she's living on her own in her, someplace else, or she's in assisted living. I want to know how she's doing. I want to make sure she is thriving. And so unless you have a full picture contextually of her day and what happens, it's really hard to do that. And so I'll end with the last thing that I love is there's a company we work with that is a smart toilet seat. And I know in Japan and other places that toilets are a big deal and there's a lot of advancement in technology. I don't know that we can say the same here in the US, but now we're starting to see more and more toilets that are smart, right? Everything from capturing vitals to analyzing what's in them. And when you start thinking about health data and you start thinking about the best technology is technology that fades into the background. And if, hey, every time I go to the toilet, it actually can weigh me and take my vitals and sort of assess how I'm doing, that's really powerful. And so that is really where I think the future is. It's around the technology that fades into the background, that's capturing a tremendous amount of data, and we connect all of those data sources to create contextual intelligence. When I think about velocity, the speed in which it takes someone to go from an idea to have adoption in the consumer segment, or even in a B2B world, it really comes down to what I call ecosystem innovation. The days of a company having an R&D, running around, creating products, testing those products, and then scaling them, we're not seeing it as much anymore. What we see is a lot of scrappy startups with crazy good ideas that can move super fast. They're very agile. The problem is they don't have the ability to necessarily pilot and scale. So by creating an ecosystem that can foster this, sort of convene this, right? Bring together the right people at the right time with the right know-how and the right resources, we can really spark innovation. And it's focused primarily on the private sector here in the US, but we're seeing more and more nonprofits and other organizations get involved, universities and colleges. And so somebody has to convene and bring those folks together and create opportunity. So one of the things we talk about all the time is a category called test beds. And a test bed is nothing more than any organization that is willing to work with a startup and pilot the technology or the product or service, because they need that in order to validate their offering, refine their offering, and then grow.